Hello and welcome to the Indian Express Live. I'm here at the beautiful Darpana campus with Mallika Sarabhai, a dancer, performance artist and an activist who has just written her memoir, Free Fall. She has joined us very kindly for a conversation on the upcoming Gujarat elections. Welcome to Indian Express. Mallika, the first question would be, I remember in an interview which you had given about a few years ago, you mentioned how you actually had to stage a dharna as a student in IIM Ahmedabad to get a dorm, a women's only dorm. And of course, that I'm sure that was, this was true for many other institutions across the country. But how do you feel, this attitude towards women has changed in this city and Gujarat at large over the years?
Even before I was born, Gujarat's women were extremely progressive. And I think the fact that so many of them joined Gandhiji in the freedom movement, so many young women used to go out and sing these Prabhat Pheriyas, as they were called, these early morning songs across the city. Also, the business culture encouraged women to join business. So already in Kasturbhai Lalbhai's family, his sister Leelavati was already in working in the business and running institutions and so on. All my aunts were running their own institutions, educational. My youngest aunt Gira was working in the mills. So I think that and the safety aspect. I remember as an 18-year-old girl, our dancers, after a performance laden with jewelry, wouldn't think twice of going out on a scooter to go home at midnight or at 11 o'clock. We never thought about it. That's no longer true. That's no longer true. So women's safety, while much better as compared to Delhi or UP, has in fact deteriorated greatly. And crimes against women have gone up tremendously. I think with the internet sensation where everybody has access to the violence on television and on the net and to gruesome details of crimes elsewhere, I think the sort of Me Too violent culture has increased dramatically. However, Gujarat still, I think, compared to other states, remains a very safe state. But in actual terms, I think it has become much more dangerous than it used to be.
Yeah, as I was traveling across the city, I was seeing a lot of women out in bikes, even late at night, and a lot of women, to see so many women out, even at late at night, is so different from other cities.
Right.
You could see them walking around.
Right.
But I was wondering how big a role do they take when it comes to making decisions in households, in voting, in...
Again, as I say, more than in a lot of states, but much less than it used to be. Women seem to have, and listen, I don't believe in generalizations, but this is a generalization. Obviously, there are lots and lots of exceptions, and obviously, it might be different for other things. But women seem to abdicate responsibility of taking decisions, and even educated women seem to be falling into the Barbie doll. I'll have a wedding with 5 days of Sangeet, and a Bollywood director will come and there is an entire class of women, especially the nouveau riche, who are like that. The middle class seems to be coming out much more into the working areas and becoming chartered accountants and this, that and the other. But somehow, I have just lost a very, very competent accountant whose mother-in-law said, sorry, I'm not feeling well, you have to stay home. And I said, why don't you just employ somebody? No. And she is a very modern, very otherwise progressive, the way she dresses and all of that. But when it comes to the family, it still seems to be very much not a young woman's prerogative to take decisions.
And, we recently did an article on the economy of Gujarat, and a lot of things came forth. One of which was like the way in which the women's participation. So that seems to be not like as it used to be. So as you
and much lower than the south.
Exactly, much lower to the other other centers.
There is so much unemployment, and when there is unemployment, the first ones to get thrown out are women. I mean, that has always been true across the world, because the male is still seen as the so-called breadwinner, even though, I always say that, the old theory of hunters and gatherers in ancient civilization. And it was always thought that the hunters were the ones who went out and brought 80% of the food to the family. In fact, now it's been proved that the gatherers, in their little ways, catching squirrels and birds, in fact, they provided 80% of the food, because the hunters would get a bison or something once every month, and the rest of the food. So there is a lot of misperception about how much women do and how much women actually earn or save or so on, which belies a lot of what is seen outside.
Yeah, and as you pointed out, but the role is like not as we expect from a state like Gujarat. Like,
No.
And why do you feel that happens? Like, is it because-
Patriarchy has been a key point of the BJP, hasn't it? It is a patriarchal organization. It's an upper caste patriarchal organization where the women might figure in the cabinet, but where else do you see the women? Do you see them in their gatherings, like you would in, for instance, Mamata's gatherings? Where are the women? The women fall into the position of patriarchy. They root for the male. They don't think independence or personhood is important. And I think we have been under BJP rule for nearly 3 decades. And I think it's percolated down everywhere.
As a performance artist, how have things changed in Gujarat and Ahmedabad and other urban centers? What do you feel? What are the changes?
The arts were never seriously sponsored or supported in Gujarat. The Gujarat doesn't have an arts culture. It has a tremendous folk culture.
Even during Congress era?
It was better. Madhavsi Solanki was the one chief minister, because he himself was a writer. He had a very good policy, but otherwise the Gujarat government has never ever considered the arts important. And the Sangeet Natak Academy and the Sahitya Academy and so are just there in name. So that, and the fact that corporate sponsorship philanthropy was on people's minds. Hospitals and educational institutions were given a lot of money, but except traditionally for my family and Papa, not even my family, but Papa it was who supported the arts, who saw that Darpana stayed afloat, that Darpana survived, that Amma could do what she wanted. Now there are a couple of families who are supporting the arts, but they only support their own project. So it's really about getting their imprint more than support for the arts. So they will find a niche where they can
And be the patron.
be the patron of that, but that doesn't translate into support for the arts in general. So it's been very, very difficult.
And of course, you belong to a family of academics and educators. So I was wondering, like, as you said, educational institutions were patronized. It has such important institutions of national importance. How do you think that has changed the atmosphere there, or is it for,
I think
for
that
better or worse?
I think the people we had in the 50s and 60s until I think the mid 70s were people who had a vision for Gujarat, and therefore thought of Gujarat 50 years from when they were. And they are the ones who built the really, really international institutions, and there are a lot in Amdavadi. When the textile industry started collapsing, we saw a huge demographic shift in who was becoming the rich. And they came with a very different set of ideas. Kasturbhai's family, for instance, would never name something after themselves. All the institutions that have started post that have been about glorifying families and individuals and certainly making money. But show me institutions post the 80s that have had any significant marker on the national or international scene. I don't mean businesses. Businesses, of course, lots and lots. But I mean things that build India as a nation. research institutions or educational institutions that do not feed directly into the profit center of companies. So in that sense, I think we lack visionaries except in business. There are business visionaries and they've made a lot of money, but I think for them to be able to see something for the nation or for the state has disappeared.
You, in our conversation earlier, you mentioned Gujaratis are hypocrites.
I think Indians are hypocrites. We are such hypocrites. We are racists, we are hypocrites, and we don't have to be. Yeah, I mean, when I say Gujaratis are hypocrites, there are more non-vegetarian booze drinking Gujaratis who will pretend to be very moralistic about their Jain fundamentals or their vegetarian, non-violent ethos that they keep in their homes. And I think that is such a hypocrisy. I had friends from the IIM who used to head liquor companies, and they used to always tell me that the person who got the Salesman of the Year award was invariably selling in Gujarat, illegally. There is more booze in Gujarat than anywhere else, and yet we maintain this hypocrisy that we are a non-drinking society. Every Gujarat, I mean, I am genuinely a vegetarian. I have chosen to be a vegetarian. I prefer to be a vegetarian. It matches my aesthetic, and I don't like killing things, animals or anything. And people look at me in awe and say, "Bahar bhi aap vegetarian hai?"
Yeah, so that sums it up.
Yeah, that sums it up.
Yeah. And you also talk about like, you know, how the queer community here is perceived and how everyone is something else at home, and like, you know, so if you could tell us a little
It's, you know, my daughter became a queer activist when she was very young, and she started something called Queerabad. And it was a safe space for queer people. And the prince of, what is the place? The prince of Rajpipla is the first person to publicly come out, and he did a lot for the movement. But people like my daughter also started having spaces where people who could not come out at home came and spoke. But the sea change has been tremendous in the last, I mean, across the country, but in Gujarat as well. In spite of still being a very conventional family atmosphere, there are more people who are beginning to come out, and there are more people who are beginning to say they are queer. So there is a change, but it's still within that very conventional family setup.
And finally, to wrap up, what are the positive changes that you have seen in the last, apart from this, you know, like, what are the positive changes that you've seen in the past 10, 15 years when it comes to Gujarat?
I haven't really. That's the truth, I haven't. I mean, to me, on all indicators, growing up in the late 50s and 60s and 70s, I think on all indicators, whether it is the vilification of the Dalit, whether it is the vilification of the Muslim, whether it's the ghettoization, whether it is 30-year-olds today who have no idea that Gujarat was different, that we were secular, that we were syncretic, that we were any of those, who just take it as their birthright that we as upper caste Hindus have it our way. And the conversations have disappeared. There used to be conversations about this. Today schools and colleges are so busy just passing degrees that there are no conversations, and parents are busy making the buck or just surviving or whatever. So with great sadness, I have to say that I see no betterment either of the warp and weft of society or of humane kindness.
Thanks a lot. Thank you for speaking with us. Thank you.